So I woke up on a desolate, windswept hilltop, my clothes splattered with a combination of kebab sauce and someone else's blood, when a thought occurred to me. I really ought to review The Mandalorian. Now this isn't as easy as you might think, because Disney Plus doesn't even launch here in the UK until March, and there was only one sensible solution to this conundrum. Can you believe I had to fly back and forth to the United States each week and fire up my totally legit Disney Plus subscription just so I could watch each new episode? Yeah, well, that's what happened. Don't ask me any specific questions about it. Anyway, so I think it's fair to say that Star Wars hasn't exactly been flourishing under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy. In fact, some might even label her tenure as disastrous, divisive, disingenuous, and, well, there's a whole bunch of other adjectives I could probably use, but shit is a one-syllable word that pretty much covers it. But then we got word that a new TV show set in the Star Wars universe was in the works, headed up jointly by Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. Now this was intriguing news, because unlike the parade of overrated hacks, miscast comedians and wannabe auteurs that have been slowly running Lucasfilm into the ground, Favreau and Filoni actually have some solid credentials behind them. One of them directed the movie that launched the entire MCU, while the other was a major force behind the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. The prospect of both of these men working together on a new Star Wars show was enough to stir a kernel of excitement in even the most jaded of fans. There was also a sense that this show might represent the beginning of a reshuffle behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, bringing in more competent, creative storytellers who understood what made Star Wars work, and backing them up with savvy, experienced directors who cut their teeth in the highly successful MCU. Anyway, that's enough backstage bullshit. You've come here because you have a simple question that needs answered. Is The Mandalorian actually any good? Well, the answer is, yeah, I guess. The Mandalorian could best be described as a mixed bag. There are things about it that work, but there's also plenty of flaws holding it back, many of which feel like they could have been easily avoided. The end result is a frustrating mix of individually good elements that don't quite mesh together into a coherent whole, and a weirdly cautious, by-the-numbers storyline that never quite lives up to its intriguing premise. Making sense of how The Mandalorian succeeds and fails is going to take a bit of explaining, so grab your pints of scotch and let's get into this. So The Mandalorian kicks off several years after the events of Return of the Jedi. The Empire's been defeated and the Galactic Republic has been restored, bringing peace and order back to the galaxy. Well, kind of. The New Republic is still trying to re-establish itself, especially in the outer reaches of the galaxy. There are fragments of Empire resistance scattered everywhere, plotting to rise to power again. Old war machines and weapons have fallen into the hands of petty warlords as they fight to carve out their own little kingdoms, while mercenaries sell their services to the highest bidder. It's a lawless, chaotic time, a dangerous time. In short, it's the perfect time for the Mandalorian, a bounty hunter and gunslinger with a dark past who brings in wanted criminals for money. The more dangerous the job, the higher the reward. And as it turns out, Mando's latest job proves to be very dangerous indeed. After meeting with Apollo Creed to cash in his latest bounty, he's put in touch with a former Imperial officer who offers him a job in exchange for a hefty payment. His mission is to get into a heavily defended outpost and recover a high-value target. So he fights his way inside and holy shit, look at that little guy! Look at his ears! Isn't he the cutest little thing you ever saw? Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Yes, so the high-value target turns out to be Baby Yoda, and yeah, he is pretty cute. A fact the show's writers are very aware of because they milk it for all it's worth in pretty much every episode. Anyway, so Mando recovers Baby Yoda and off he goes, and that's basically the plot for the first episode. If that analysis seems pretty short and simplistic to you, prepare to have your expectations not subverted, because that's pretty much what The Mandalorian offers. Simple, uncomplicated entertainment. Whether or not that's a good thing, we'll talk about later. The second episode is basically 30 straight minutes of complete busy work. Mando returns to his ship to bring Baby Yoda back to evil Imperial guy, but oh no, it's been stripped for parts by a bunch of Jawas. So he tracks them down with the help of an unreasonably altruistic passing civilian, but oh no, they'll only give him the parts back if he recovers a weird egg thing for them. And oh no, the egg's being guarded by a big scary monster. This reminds me of a fucking side quest in a role-playing game. Go to a place, kill a monster, take a thing back to the people and collect your reward. And all of it just to restore the status quo. Anyway, he does it and off he goes again. The third episode brings the opening trilogy to a close. Mando delivers Baby Yoda to evil Imperial guy and upgrades his armor because I guess we're still in video game mode at this point. But then he feels all guilty, so he attacks his clients after receiving legitimate payment from them. What a dick. And rescues Baby Yoda before they can experiment on him. But then Apollo Creed shows up to stop him, and there's a big firefight, and everything is looking grim for Mando. But then a bunch of other Mandalorians show up to save the day, buying time for him to escape. The point of all of this is to establish the basic premise for the rest of the season. Mando is now a wanted man, on the run from both the Imperials and his former employers while he tries to keep Baby Yoda alive and figure out why he's so important to everyone. From here, the show kind of devolves into a collection of self-contained adventures. Mando travels from place to place, looking for a safe haven, only to get drawn into a conflict between some peaceful villagers and a local warlord, or enlisted by a wannabe bounty hunter to take down a dangerous assassin, or joins a group of mercenaries to free a convict from a prison ship. It's standard stuff that'll be pretty familiar to fans of old Western movies, and while none of these episodes go too far wrong, they don't exactly blaze new trails story-wise either. It's simple, uncomplicated stuff that moves along briskly and efficiently. Then I guess the show remembers it's supposed to end the season with some kind of resolution, so it basically brings back all the previous characters for a big showdown with the Imperials. There's some action and explosions, a few deaths, and the introduction of a recurring villain for the next season. And that's basically the storyline for Season 1. It didn't take long because there really isn't much to say about it. Yeah, there's lots of individual elements and little inconsistencies that I could probably spend hours picking apart like a total asshole, so let's do exactly that. Why has Mando never heard of the Jedi when they were one of the most legendary organizations in the galaxy? If you're fighting someone wearing indestructible armor hand to hand, why would you want to punch them in the fucking helmet? Why does Mando allow Baby Yoda to wander around unguarded in highly dangerous environments when he's supposed to be keeping him safe? Why is Mando's ship the only one in the galaxy with shields? Why would anyone build their bar over the entrance to a fucking sewer? Why does Moff Gideon give our heroes until nightfall to decide whether or not to surrender? Is that really the kind of decision that takes hours to arrive at? Aren't you just giving them more time to come up with an escape plan? For that matter, why does Gideon make his big entrance by killing like a dozen of his own men? Isn't that just going to inspire desertion and mutiny amongst the troops that are left? Why does some asshole compare Mando's ship to a slot machine on Canto Bight? Wait, what? Canto Bight. Canto Bight. Canto Bight. Oh god, it's real. It's acknowledging The Last Jedi. We can never fucking escape from that movie. I said before that The Mandalorian was a mixed bag, and that feeling filters through to every aspect of its production, from the acting, to the direction, to the script writing. Even the special effects vary wildly from episode to episode. Some shots are genuinely impressive, featuring a smart mix of CGI and practical effects that seamlessly blend together to create decent action sequences with a bit of punch behind them. But others look dated and simplistic and totally unconvincing, and it's pretty obvious where they've had to cut corners to stretch the budget for the bigger set pieces. The cast is mostly competent, experienced actors. It's always nice to see Carl Weathers on screen, and veterans like Clancy Brown, Werner Herzog and Giancarlo Esposito know exactly what they're doing. But for the life of me, I'll never understand why they cast Gina Carano. I mean, she's big and burly, and she obviously knows what she's doing when it comes to the fight scenes, but she's a fucking cage fighter, not an actor. Watching her trying to emote is almost as painful as watching Brie Larson trying to be funny.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Oh well, it could have been worse. They could have cast Ronda Rousey. The situation isn't helped by the show's dialogue, which most of the time makes the room seem like a masterpiece of artistic alliteration.
What a story, Mark.
Yeah, you can say that again.
It's clunky, dumb, obvious, and honestly feels like it was a first draft written in a different language and run through Google Translate on the day of shooting. Many episodes also waste a lot of time on pointless conversations, like the back and forth between two speeder pilots that drags on forever. Moments like this are trying so hard to be self-deprecating and meta that it was like watching a bad SNL routine. We get it, stormtroopers are bad shots because of plot convenience. Shining a giant spotlight on it doesn't make it more funny. Or a character explaining how he recovered a damaged droid and taught it how to function again. Like, a single line of dialogue would have been enough to cover something like this, but instead we get some big elaborate flashback montage set to poignant music and a heartfelt voiceover, like this is some beloved character we're supposed to care about. Each of these things feels exactly like what they are. Padding intended to bulk out the episode runtime and distract you from the fact that most of the time there really isn't much going on in terms of plots. The storyline for most episodes are the kind of thing you could fit on the back of a beer mat, amounting to little more than Mando gets given an objective, he completes the objective, and then he leaves. Episodes 4 and 5 in particular feel like short stories spun out into full episodes. There are no clever switches, no stunning revelations or shocking betrayals. It's simple, predictable and unambitious stuff, and the end result is a cautious, safe kind of show that doesn't take any big risks or throw any major curveballs. But what the hell, at least it doesn't try to subvert our expectations. It also resorts to the same tried and tested plot devices to get the main character out of trouble, like Mando's flamethrower, or how his armor conveniently deflects blaster fire when the script needs it to, but fails when it wants to put him in jeopardy, or how there always seems to be a helpful supporting character on hand to provide exposition and local knowledge. Don't think about it too much, just keep things moving. Most shows like this tend to run into trouble because they overreach themselves, trying to do too much with too little, and ultimately exposing the shortcomings of both their budget and their writing. But The Mandalorian kind of has the opposite problem. It's a little too small, too restrained, too simplistic. And it's a shame because there's a lot of potential here. There are little hints of expanded lore and background, like how the Mandalorians have to earn their armor piece by piece through successful missions. It gives us a glimpse into a complex and intriguing culture that I want to know more about. But then the script just goes, fuck it, and moves on before we can learn anything more. It also presents us with some interesting moral dilemmas, like when one character openly questions whether people's lives were actually better under Imperial rule compared to the world of conflict and chaos they now live in. It's an interesting perspective that I would have liked to learn more about, but the show again just goes fuck it and kills everyone. Don't think too much about it, just keep it moving. I can understand the desire to break away from the sprawling, epic excesses of the movies and tell a more grounded, intimate story, and watching the short, self-contained mini-adventures this show relies on, it's pretty clear The Mandalorian is paying tribute to the classic weekly adventure serials that captivated a young George Lucas back in the day. That's all very nice, but unfortunately it's not the 1950s anymore. If you're going to keep your storylines small and tight and self-contained, then they need to be stories worth listening to. They need to be smart, complex, compelling, and captivating. You need more than just a cool looking protagonist and some half decent fight scenes to get people to buy into your show. The more I watched The Mandalorian, the more I found myself comparing it to something like Farscape. Both shows deal with a main character being hunted across the galaxy by various hostile factions, forcing them to bargain with criminals, mercenaries, and underworld figures to stay alive. Both feature multiple different planets and settings, and both give the protagonist something vitally important they have to protect. The problem is that Farscape actually did this shit far better, and with fewer resources. The writing was sharper, the plots were smarter, more complex and thought-provoking, the characters were more interesting and better developed, the acting was definitely better, and even the special effects still hold up pretty well. Basically what I'm saying here is you should probably watch Farscape over this. Now, that's not to say The Mandalorian is a total failure. There are definitely things it gets right, and a lot of them centre around Mando himself. He's an interesting character, Clever, resourceful and mysterious. He's a ruthless and jaded fighter, but with enough compassion to keep him likeable. He has moments of vulnerability, but he never becomes a wet blanket. And for once, he's not forced to become submissive and weak to put over the strong female characters in the show. Take note, Kathleen Kennedy. Both genders can be strong, smart and capable without diminishing each other. Clearly, they wanted a lone gunslinger kind of situation with this guy. Not only is he a man with no name, but he's also a man with no face. Just an impassive steel mask that could have anything going on behind it. And just like Boba Fett, he's made interesting by what we don't know about him, rather than what we do. But the biggest thing The Mandalorian succeeds in is conjuring up the old feelings of adventure and endless possibilities that Star Wars used to be so good at. That iconic scene of Luke Skywalker staring off into the binary sunset is so well remembered because it stirs something universal in each and every one of us. We've all imagined some exciting new life beyond the mundane crap we have to deal with each day. We've all fantasized about being free to travel the world, seeking out new adventures and experiences. Well, until we wake up in an ice bath in some backstreet hotel in Bangkok with one of our kidneys missing. But The Mandalorian seems to understand this universal longing for freedom and adventure, and it manages to play on it really well. For the first time in years, I started to get that old Star Wars feeling of having a whole galaxy of different planets and cultures at my fingertips. It's everything the sequel trilogy tried and failed to be. And maybe that's what this really comes down to. Most of the praise that's been heaped on The Mandalorian has come from a fanbase disenchanted and alienated by years of wildly inconsistent movies and desperate for something resembling the Star Wars they used to love. And even if it's only a pale, flaccid imitation, well, it's better than nothing, I guess. Ultimately then, The Mandalorian is the entertainment equivalent of a half-decent pub lunch. It's simple, honest, unpretentious stuff that's been done tolerably well. It's not gonna blow you away, but it's not gonna make you pin the landlord to the wall and demand a refund either. And like a pub lunch, it goes down better if you have a few beers first and don't think about it too much. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Go away now.